There's two contexts for the pressures and expectations that I see business, and especially multinational corporations, facing with respect to human rights. The first set of pressures and expectations are now pretty well established over the last decade or longer. There's growing expectations from different stakeholders, from consumers, from investors, from employees of companies themselves, who in different ways and sometimes for different reasons look to companies to try to do some good in the world, or at a very minimum avoid doing harm. And what's really bolstered these expectations have been the development of a whole normative framework of standards going back now almost 2 decades to various multi-stakeholder standards, but really most significantly going back to 2011, when the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights were agreed unanimously by the UN Human Rights Council. Ever since then, the proposition has been fully established in the international community, and indeed in much of the business community, at least among large multinational corporations, that companies have a responsibility to respect human rights. Those pressures intensify, though, as progress is made in certain areas, as new issues evolve for different industries and in different countries and regions of the world, as new regulations, particularly around mandatory due diligence and disclosure, emerge in different jurisdictions like the US and the EU and UK, Canada, and elsewhere. We've seen that with respect to conflict minerals, as well as modern slavery and human trafficking. So there's a whole range of pressures and expectations that are important, but I would characterize them as fairly conventional. This new context of geopolitical and domestic political disruption, melded together, I dare say, with populism, nationalism, ethnic chauvinism, is really putting the spotlight on companies to step up and to be counted. And corporate leaders don't, as a normal default, look for opportunities to cross swords publicly, or for that matter privately, with US presidents or other political leaders. That's not what they're in business to do. But what we've seen is CEOs in particular feeling compelled to speak out. Ken Frazier said memorably in his reaction to Charlottesville last summer that a line had been crossed. So there are now more expectations on companies, and I think that some of that pressure is coming from various stakeholders, but especially from employees of companies. And it was fascinating to see in mid-June of this year of 2018, employees from companies like Microsoft and Salesforce speaking out internally within their companies, but making their views public as to where they wanted to see their companies stand in public. So I think that we're now in a period of ever-intensifying pressure and expectation for companies on human rights, both for those more traditional reasons that have been mounting for a decade or two now, but also in this new context, which really turbocharges, if you will, the debate, and I think really is compelling companies to become human rights advocates more explicitly, perhaps, than they had thought possible or desirable.